All right. Hello. Good morning, everyone. This is Justin at Seeking Context, and this is season 2, episode 2. In the theme, episode 2 of each season is apparently a military episode. Last year was Nate Downing, and this year I've got Jeff Cannon and Matt Ayres, and we're going to be talking about Air Force culture and fighter pilot culture and a place called the Weapons Instructor course and the culture of that organization within the Air Force. So Matt was my first roommate at the Air Force Academy with our friend Rob Lee, and Jeff was my roommate for the next 3 years at the Air Force Academy. And I attended both of their Air Force retirements in the last few years. And we all had kind of different but similar careers. I flew F-15Cs, Matt flew F-16s, and Jeff flew F-15Es. So we have a diverse experience in a organization that is all similar and also very different among each community. And so I want to welcome you both. Thanks for joining me today. And I thought we'd start just by giving a little background on your careers. So after we left the Air Force Academy, both of you went off to varied, storied careers. And so Jeff, go ahead and what's kind of your highlights?
Yeah, so graduated with these two jokers from the Air Force Academy, the aluminum womb, the zoo, the hate machine in 96. I didn't take any delay at all. I was fortunate enough to get straight off to pilot training at Del Rio by the Sea, down in Del Rio, Texas. From there, went to F-15E training out at Seymour Johnson in North Carolina. Wound up doing an operational tour there. Went to the Air Force Weapons School after that first assignment, and then off to the 90th Fighter Squadron at Elmendorf, Alaska, to continue flying the Strike Eagle. Got picked up to go to head back down to Nellis to teach at the Strike Eagle division of the weapons school that then became the 17th Weapons, and promptly spent the rest of my career anchored at Nellis and teaching at the weapons school. So I spent the last 13 years and change teaching at the weapons school, and then retired in right at the end of 2017. So the 17 Bravo, the fall class in 17 was my last class. Retired out of that, and then kind of took off the uniform and still do essentially the same kind of thing. I run a flight simulation facility out at Nellis with the F-22 community now. So in a nutshell.
Great. How about you, Matt? What happened to you after we graduated?
Yeah, well, before I tell you that, I would just like to say, if you asked any 23-year-old pilot training graduate if they would sign up for 20 years to do Jeff Cannon's career, every single person, man, woman, alien, would say, yes, let's do it. I could go fly for 20 years. It'd be amazing.
Yeah. Recruiting would not be a problem.
Oh my gosh, retention would be like 106%.
It was definitely it was a winning lottery ticket. How about that?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No, I did the exact same thing with a couple key differences, which will have some exponential ramifications later on in my career. I waited 9 months after graduation until I went to pilot training, and in that time I was an aeronautical engineer for some of the test facilities at the Air Force Academy, which was great. I learned a ton. After pilot training, got selected to fly F-16s. My first operational assignment was in Kunsan, South Korea. After that, came back to the Southeast United States to Shaw Air Force Base, did 3.5 years there. Went to operational tests after that at Eglin. It's a wonderful place to fly airplanes. And went after that. During that time, I went to the weapons instructor course, got selected to come back as an instructor. Then I did 3 years going to school in the Pentagon after that, came back to Shaw again and finished up as a squadron commander and then the deputy OG. And now I've done a couple different things since retirement, but currently working for a DoD-focused software company.
Cool. Well, so to start out, we've all had a lot of education. It takes a lot of training to become just an Air Force officer and then become a pilot. And so my first question for today actually comes from a longtime listener on the Seeking Context podcast. It's Hadley Downing of Billings, Montana. She is age 8. And her question, and I'll put this to you, Matt Ayres, how long did it take you to figure out every button, and did you get to push them all?
So that's funny. In the F-16, the answer to the second question first is the easy no. There are 3 or 4 buttons I did not push. And how long did it take? So that's interesting. I remember the first time I got to see an F-16 cockpit, and I looked in there and I said, oh, that's it. I just can't do it. There's no way I'll ever know what all these gauges and buttons do. And when you first go through F-16 training, it is about 9 months, give or take. And I will tell you, at the end of those 9 months, I knew what every single button did and every single gauge. And a lot of the buttons are multifunction. But it's just like learning anything else you do, whether it's riding a tricycle, shooting a basketball, writing a story, right? You start with the very basic thing, and then tomorrow you do the basic thing plus a little bit. And after a while, you just know how to do it.
Yeah, cool. So Jeff, similar question for you, but like there are just so many different levels of proficiency. And when you're kind of become an instructor at the weapons school, and then you kind of become a leader figuring out how you teach the instructors to be instructors at the weapons school. Like, I guess, how do you view that in terms of how do you teach somebody to be an instructor? And how does that differ from teaching somebody to train new pilots?
Okay. Well, I'd say number one, one of the things I enjoyed most about the career field was that it's a continual learning process, that it never really stops. So there's no defined end to it. You're constantly learning. Matt worked in operational tests where they're delivering new software, delivering new weapons, delivering new tactics. So there's always something going on. So you individually are always learning as well. At the baseline, I never worked as a pilot training instructor. I never worked as an FTU, which is the first contact with a fighter, the school that teaches people how to fly F-16 specifically, or F-15Es or F-15Cs specifically. They call that FTU, the Flying Training Unit. I never worked there, but those early stages of the training are primarily focused kind of on the procedure and just the basic techniques of starting the airplane, taking off, flying formation, flying instruments, landing out of a visual pattern, employing the airplane kind of at its most basic level, getting that stuff down, getting those basic skill sets down. But there's a hierarchy to it that once that training is complete and people move on to the next phase, in a fighter squadron, that's what I always thought was, kind of a neat thing. There was a constant, there was always another upgrade. There was always something else to learn. That once you get basically qualified in the airplane, then a year or two later, then you get chosen to go through the 2-ship flight lead program, where at the end of that, you're qualified to lead 2 jets around. You do that successfully for some period of time, you get selected to go through the 4-ship flight lead upgrade program. Now you've actually got a no-kidding, fighting capability with 4 fighter jets, kind of the baseline for what most of the tactics are built around. After that, now you can move either into like a mission commander, where you would be in charge of a much larger group of airplanes to go accomplish a mission, and then eventually an instructor level, where now you are qualified to teach all of those other skill sets, all of those other tactics, all of those syllabi. So that's, I don't know if that fully answers the question in the difference, but there is a hierarchy to it. It is a constant process throughout the system. And I would say one of the success stories, certainly in the Air Force, looking back on it now, is how successful those training programs are at taking very young people, in their early 20s, straight out of college, and within a period of months and even just a couple of years, not only are they flying airplanes on their own that are worth $50 to $100+ million, and we totally trust them to do that, but that they're also at a very early age. I mean, we were in our early 20s, mid 20s as 4-ship flight leads and mission commanders, leading large packages across training ranges, and leading 4 or 8, 12-ship packages worth of jets around. So the strength of that training system and the redundancy has proven over time to be a really successful way to get people trained and qualified and ready to do the job. So it's actually kind of shocking looking back on it every now and then when I see one of the CAF fighter squadrons come through Nellis, and you see what a young 2-ship or 4-ship flight lead looks like. And it is quite shocking how young they actually are, but totally competent, totally trustworthy, and that system of systems that's in place to get them ready to do that job. All the prerequisites, all the academic training that goes on, then into simulators, then into supervised flying, in the cockpit, supervised flying from another airplane, the check ride process, and that continual evaluation and training process. Very successful, very safe. And very effective in combat. So pretty neat thing.
Yeah, when you put it all out like that, you look back and you're like, gosh, how did I make it through it? It's almost, and when you look forward at the beginning, I can identify with what Matt said, like just somebody that was 3 weeks ahead of you in training. It seems like what they do is impossible. You'll never be able to.
I'll never be able to do that.
Well, by the same token, you can also look at some of the people that were in the classes ahead of us, and you're like, you know what? If that chucklehead can get through this, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be okay. So when you ran into that, I had a really hard time with instruments. Instruments never made sense to me. But I knew I had to get through instruments in order to fly fighters so I could fly VFR all the time and never really have to fly instruments. Because if you don't get into a fighter, then you fly a lot more instruments. But I had a really hard time with that. But I remember thinking there were a couple of people that made it through in front of me. I'm pretty sure if that chucklehead can make it, I can probably fake my way through this.
That's a good mental way to look at it.
Yeah, that's right.
So both of you went through the weapons instructor course and then became instructors in that program. It's also kind of, shorthand for it is like the Top Gun program that the Navy has. But I guess for either of you, maybe Matt, what is the weapons school or the weapons?
Yeah, so I think, at this point in our life, right, there's probably more people who've seen Top Gun than have been vaccinated. So you can probably start with as a general rule that most people understand Top Gun when they've seen the movie, right? So if you think that's a Navy course, it's usually 6 weeks to 12 weeks, depending on what version you're doing. The Air Force Weapons School is 6 months. In fact, you leave whatever assignment you're doing, you go TDY for a little over 6 months. So it is truly a PhD level course. Now, I'm going to say some things that Jeff Cannon's going to disagree with, and he should. We all have different opinions, but I'm going to call it a leadership course, but we pretend it's a tactical improvement course, right? So you show up, and what you do for the first little bit of the course is become a master of employing that airplane, right? So you're really focused on just you. But very quickly in the course, I'd say in the F-16 and the F-15E course are pretty similar. Out of those 6 months, by month 2, you're already into problem sets that value, the solutions value teamwork and planning and including other capabilities, and talking to people that do different missions than you, which at this point in your career, you haven't done very much. So that's all brand new, right? And so it really is a course to have you understand, if you think you're going to take your little piece of the Air Force and go out and solve these huge problems, that's probably naive, right? You are going to need all these other capabilities, but we haven't ever shown you what they are because you get stationed at Shaw. You don't get stationed at Seymour Johnson or at Tinker or at any of the other places, right? So this is the first opportunity for you to interact with those other folks, learn how and why what they do. They can teach you some things they do. You can teach them some things that you do. And that's really what the course values when it's all said and done, is how do you make sure that we are teaching the right lessons moving forward.
Cool. Jeff, would you agree?
Yeah. I think at a macro level, that's 100% true for people that hadn't seen the course before. Just like Matt said, 5.5, 6 months to get through the program. It's on a very strict schedule where the Air Force runs, an Alpha class for the first 6 months of the year and a Bravo class for the second 6 months in order to keep kind of the machine generating weapons officers for the combat Air Force. So that's the eventual goal for the program is to graduate generally somebody that's kind of in that mid-level 03 captain to junior 04 major level. That is going to, they're in the realm of what, 28 to probably 32, 33 years old when they graduate. They're going to get assigned back to either the unit that they came from or an operational unit somewhere else in their community. When they get to that squadron, they're going to be responsible for essentially being the senior instructor, the senior tactics instructor for certain within the unit. So there will be other people in the organization that are higher rank, that is the commander, the director of operations. There's all sorts of people that will be higher ranks and have other jobs in running the squadron. But I would say that the lead tactical instructor, the top of the tactical pyramid in the squadron is going to be that newly graduated.
Yeah, I concur with all that, Jeff. And I should say, I don't want to downplay you. When you leave there, you will be a true subject matter expert on your aircraft, on your mission set. The level of academics where we start is usually at least an order of magnitude higher than where you end at your basic fighter training, right? So we are already starting you at a level that, you had to already be very well studied and very well versed in your aircraft or mission set to get there. And we start there as we go up. So I don't want to downplay that portion.
No. And I'm not disagreeing. I'm just, for people that are not versed in what the program is for, at a baseline level, that's what the weapons school is delivering to the Air Force, is an instructor's instructor back at the squadron level. At the next level, what Matt's talking about, and I'd say one of the strengths of the weapons school long term, not only to the Air Force as a whole, but certainly to combat capability across the board, is all the integration of other assets, of other capabilities, the networking across communities that happens kind of in that second half of the weapons school syllabus. They've moved now to where essentially the last 6, almost 8 weeks of the program is weapons school integration, where you are out of your individual major weapon system stovepipe, and you are always operating with at least one and normally numerous other platforms, sometimes even platforms that don't fly, that you're operating with space assets or cyber assets, or you've got battlefield airmen that are controlling your fires and all those other sorts of things going on. So that level of integration, that the knowledge of how to put the pieces and parts together operationally to run an air campaign and to win an air campaign, coupled with the networking that comes with that, is kind of that second order effect that has really carried the weapons school to the next level, I'd say, in the last 20 plus years.
Right.
Probably even a little bit more than that. I think that really, the genesis of that, and kind of maybe we'll talk about this more moving forward. There was a transformational period for the weapons school when we were kids, coming out of Gulf War I. That when we look back at the history of the weapons school prior to Gulf War I, you had the focus was primarily on being the best fighter pilot in your particular aircraft, as opposed to post Gulf War. Guys came back from that and they said, hey, we don't go to war individually, we go to war together. We have to figure out a way to put all these pieces and parts together. And that was really the focus, kind of moving forward to opening up the fighter weapons school transition to the United States Air Force Weapons School. And that's where you start to see the additional major weapon systems coming in, the different communities being brought into the program, and really that explosive growth in the integration phases of the weapons school.
Matt, you took your squadron into combat, Afghanistan, I believe, a few years back. When you look at that experience or other times you were deployed, was your own weapons school experience, how helpful was that to you in being a leader? And then in terms of like the other people that have been through the program that were serving with you, what was your common experience through this program important to your effectiveness as kind of a integrated projection of American power?
Yeah, I thought it was very valuable. So we were actually flying out of Jordan through Iraq and Syria is where we went in 2014. One of the things where we were deployed was typically a training base. We had flown in 1991, we'd flown some missions out of there. Then again in 2003, we'd flown some missions out of there, but it was on a kind of a warm status where we would rotate squadrons in there once a year for 2 or 3 months, and they would do training with the Jordanians and regional partners. And so when we arrived, Inherent Resolve had only been going about 90 days, not even quite. And so we had to start from scratch. We didn't have enough area to, store our weapons. We didn't have enough area to store our jets. We were using weapons that were old with some very non-standard fusing because that's all we had when we got there. And so that's a background to tell you, despite all the changes, all the things we had trained for, we were doing things that were very different. But my squadron had confidence in me, not because I'm some great leader, I think, but mostly because they knew that I had this experience at the weapons school that, I was calling people. I called Jeff Cannon. I called all my friends and all the people I knew, and I said, hey, I'm running into this problem. What would you suggest? What kind of fusing should we use? What kind of, what's your opinion here? I remember one of the conversations I had with Jeff at that time. I needed to know what the Strike Eagles were doing because we were having a hard time communicating with these other squadrons. So I just called him, literally just, hey man, tell me your experience and what kind of things they're thinking about, right? And so the ability to reach out through non-standard chains, even if it's over email, even if it's over voice, and get an expert to tell you, hey, this is what's going on, so you can make better decisions. That was invaluable.
Yeah, that's cool. So we were talking about the culture and how there was a shift. There's a kind of sort of a motto or a tagline about that. I didn't really hear this until towards the end of my career or afterwards, where the instructors coming out of that program they were wanting to be humble, credible, and approachable.
Yep, humble, approachable, credible.
And I remember I was in the F-15C community, and my early experience in the C model community did not really match that. Humble just really is not something that factored in to the leadership. Now, credible was 100% there, and work ethic there, right? But the humility that wasn't a part of it. And so I kind of viewed, when I heard of this, that the kind of tagline was part of a turnaround effort. And I'm curious if that's your experience. So for our listeners, Jeff is at your retirement, they said that you were the longest known serving weapons instructor in the program that served consecutively for that many years.
Well, that's because I never got it right. They would never let me leave because I kept screwing it up. So I had to hang around until I ran out of time.
Detention, right?
No, it's so over time, I would say to just our timeline from when we got involved in the program. I learned about the weapons school shortly after becoming qualified to fly the F-15E. In a CAF fighter squadron, the 335th Chiefs Wampum at Seymour Johnson, and I hadn't the foggiest idea. I'd been flying the airplane for a year and a half, and I didn't know that the weapons school existed. My situational awareness bubble was so minuscule that I didn't even realize that there were certain people walking around with this patch on their left shoulder that was different than everyone else's. But what I started to notice is that there was a certain cadre of instructors in the squadron that planned differently, that organized their flights differently, that briefed at kind of a different level of professionalism, that led their flights differently with a level of direction and prowess and adaptability that was just different. And then you'd get back in the debrief, and I thought, man, there's this group of guys that I am really learning a lot from in the sorties that I get the opportunity to fly with them. And then eventually, the aha moment that it's like, hey, these guys have all kind of been to the program. Now, that's not to say that we didn't have other capable guys in the squadron. That squadron in particular at that time, kind of 2000, 2002, we had some tremendous non-patch wearer weapons officers in the squad. Super capable guys.
Right. And just for the audience, a patch is a person that when you graduate at the weapons school, you get a patch that says Fighter Weapons Instructor Course or Weapons Instructor Course. And then you call those people a patch. And if a guy is a patch, you have to respect that person regardless of his.
They walk into a room with a certain amount of credibility, and then they open their mouth, and then it all starts kind of bleeding out after that if they're not.
How does that old saying? Better to keep
that guy's a patch
and be thought a fool.
Yeah.
Be thought a fool.
But that's the symbol anyway. But like I said, that's not to say that there aren't patch wearer level instructors without a patch on throughout all the communities. I mean, I look back at that first squadron, and guys like Chemo Jordan and Vito Veed and Phoenix Robinson and Yo Shutke, and none of those guys were weapons school grads. None of those guys were patch wearers, but they were all operating at that level. But the first time that I learned it about weapons school was the fact that not only those guys, but then this other cadre of instructors that was just operating at a different level. And I kind of start poking around into it and think, okay, that's something that I'm interested in being a part of. I'm sorry, I'm losing track here. Well, put me back on track here, Justin. I'm going down rabbit trails.
Well, we're talking about humble, credible. We were talking about
Okay.
humble, credible, and approachable, and how it seemed like that was an initiative to use that phrase to encapsulate the type of person that we want you to be when you go out and sort of set the culture. Because I view the weapons school really as kind of a center of excellence, right? It's where we kind of set standards, we decide how we're going to operate, and then you got to have all these people go out and make disciples of your sort of values. And the version of the weapons school instructor, or the image of it, it seemed to change over the course of my career. And I'm curious if it was an intentional effort or if you viewed it as such. Sorry
about getting pulled down rabbit trails on story time there. It's pretty easy to start reminiscing about some great dudes and good times. So I would say that time frame when I kind of started to become aware of the weapons school, that 2000, 2001 time frame, I was fortunate enough, and maybe part of the reason that I was drawn to the program is before humble, approachable, credible started showing up as on letterhead and on people's taglines and all this other kind of stuff. Before it was codified at that level, it existed, and it existed in the people that were the instructors that were in my squadron, the patch wearers that were there. So they had already they were that way. But I think there was a transition going on. I think if you look back in kind of weapons school, Air Force weapons school history, you'll start seeing it written down that humble, approachable, credible was a focus across the board for the type of people that we were looking to attract to the program, the type of people that we were looking to graduate, and a standard that we expected our graduates to continue to operate at once they left the program. I think you start to see that written down and more codified in kind of that 2003, 2004 timeframe. It's not to say that didn't exist prior, but maybe just wasn't quite so much of a focus as it was afterwards. Now, I know a lot of guys that you're talking about, and they are great dudes. They are fantastic fighter pilots. They're super fun guys to hang around with. But yeah, the humble thing, it's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am kind of attitude. So yeah, the humble part is a continual struggle at some level for some folks. But they are really, really good at what they do, type deal. But I think that was in addition to the transition out of maybe the focus of the fighter weapons school back in kind of the early to mid 80s kind of time frame of being the ace of the base, being the absolute best in the jet, and dominating everyone else, not only in your squadron but on the base. That maybe that was kind of the focus. Coming out of that Gulf War, Gulf War one thing, where now we're focused on trying to plus up integration. The idea that there's actually a lot of really healthy things from an organizational standpoint about fighter pilot culture. The no rank in the debrief is a big one. That it doesn't matter what rank you wear on your shoulder or what job you have. You could be the wing commander on the base. If you walk into a fighter debrief and you were out of position, you missed your targeting responsibility, you missed your target, the lieutenant flight lead or the captain flight lead that is much junior to you is expected to debrief you on what you did wrong, how to recognize it the next time, and how to fix it. Now there's going to be the level of respect that goes along with that sort of thing. But that part of the culture is a very important thing that helps us get better and get ready for combat and, kill and survive.
Yeah.
When it comes down to the nitty gritty. So there were other elements of the Air Force that did not have that inherent in their culture. And I think one of the great things about the integration and the growth at the weapons school is to bring other communities that maybe didn't have that debrief culture, that fighter pilot debrief culture inherent to their community, and bring them into the weapons school, where now that rising tide raises all ships. And that's where, we've gotten into a couple of things where, some old heads will reach back to the front office there at the weapons school and, why are we adding these guys to the weapons school? And what does this aircraft have to do anything with the weapons school? Or why are these people showing up at the weapons school and getting a weapons squadron and getting a patch? You go, okay, lighten up, Francis. Number one. Number two, the idea is there's some inherent goodness in the way that we plan, brief, execute, and particularly kind of the lead pipe cruelty, mercenary sensibility that goes into a fighter debrief. And other communities can really benefit from that level of truthiness.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on that, Justin, just in a couple seconds here. So I 1,000% agree with what Jeff's saying there. So around the time frame when that became popular is when I was applying to go to weapons school. So I've always known that as a tagline. But you have to think about what was happening in the Air Force at that time. We were transitioning away from a small fighter-centric weapons school, and at that time, just because of the weapons we had before we had all these advanced sensors and smart weapons and all these things. I mean, think about it, it's like pre-cell phone times, right? Like, technology changed. To be proficient required a lot of, I have to put my airplane at this dive angle, at this altitude, at this specific thing, with this weapons setting and this fuse setting. And it was very physical and mentally engaging, right? As we've become more technology centric, weapons do most of that work for us, but there's a lot of upfront work with using other agencies to get the information you need to get the right weapon and the right fusing, as well as targeting data and all these other things, right? So the weapons school was starting to realize that and expand out of a fighter-centric into a more force-enabled type environment. Well, guess what? A lot of other weapon systems didn't have that fighter pilot culture. And so what did we come off like when we, second best was never good enough? You either did it perfectly or you got debriefed. And guess what? No one ever did it perfectly. So everybody got debriefed. And unless you weren't born into that culture, we came off like a whole bunch of jerks that thought we were better than everybody else. And that we very well may have, but we needed to understand how to take that culture and spread it in a way that was usable to other weapon systems. So that's one of the main reasons that the Air Force Weapons School had to expand and start being thinking differently.
Yeah, so I think that 2003, 2004 is really when you start seeing the humble, approachable, credible written down, reinforced across the board as a standard. I think it was a very, if not effective, a very important recruiting tool as well, to speak to people that would maybe have wanted to get into the program for reasons outside of that were more selfish and more self-serving. That, hey, this is not a program for you. I think it caged some of the other squadrons and some of the other programs that were in there to stay focused on that. And it helped with some decisions about retaining folks. The weapons school is a very difficult program for a lot of the folks that show up. It's the first time that they encounter wholesale failure in their life. In a lot of ways, a lot of the folks that show up on day one, they were distinguished graduates, out of the Air Force Academy or whatever their ROTC program was. They were top of their class in pilot training, and they got all the awards coming out of F-16 school, and they got all the awards for this and all this other sort of thing. Some people had never actually failed a flying training ride, had never actually hooked or gotten an unsat on a flying training ride. And then they show up at the weapons school, and I mean, the instructors are just eating your lunch on a day-to-day basis. and you are tasting of your own blood on day one, failing academic tests. I haven't done that in, 15 years. You're failing rides. You're getting an unsat on an actual flying ride. So it's a big shock to the system type deal. But the idea is that you've attracted people that are there for the purpose of not only making their own skills better and working on that through the course of the program, but on the day that they get their badge, and then a couple days later when they actually graduate and walk across the stage. One of the key ideas behind Humble, Approachable, Credible is at that point that you get your badge and you walk across the stage. That is the last day of your Air Force flying career, that it's about you. That the focus from that day forward on everything you do in your Air Force flying career is to make the next generation better and stronger and faster than your own. And Humble, Approachable, Credible is a key part of that, to say, hey, we're going to focus on you. We're going to beat you up. You are going to encounter wholesale failure like never before, but you're going to figure out how to fight through that. You're going to figure out what your tells are when you encounter failure so that you don't act like an idiot and embarrass yourself, being egotistical about covering up your failures, because it's the number one way to chip away at your credibility and your approachability out in the CAF. But as soon as you walk across the stage and the program is done and you're a graduate, the focus needs to be from that point forward, needs to be making the next generation better.
Matt, from your view as a squadron commander and a leader out in the combat Air Force, did you see the quality or the approach of people coming out of that program change over your career? Or is it any different today than it was 15 years ago when you went through the program?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, I like how you worked the combat Air Forces in there to explain CAF. That was well done.
Thank you.
You are 98 right now on your hosting capability. So in the F-16 specifically, we've always been a little bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. And Justin, we've had these conversations before. You came from a community that was really single focused on a very narrow mission set, and the F-16 was the opposite of that. We did a lot of mission sets just based off the way the aircraft was employed.
Right. Just to give some context there. So Matt's talking about, I flew in the F-15C, and that airplane just does air to air. We only shoot down other airplanes. That's its sole role. And Matt flew the F-16, and they do air to ground, and they do air to air. And there's a multi-role aircraft, which means that they don't have as much time to focus on a single task. But the Air Force requires a lot more than a single task out of its people and its weapon systems.
Yeah, and so I think Jeff Cannon probably had a very similar experience based off the role that his aircraft was designed to accomplish, right? And so when I graduated, this was, so 2004, we'd just gone back into Afghanistan, or we just gone to Afghanistan, and that was just kicking off, right? So fast forward, we're almost 20 years post Afghanistan, let alone we never really left Iraq from 1991. And so the mission set of what we were doing when we deployed completely changed from, we were really worried about high-end threats. So in 1991, people forget, but other than Russia, Iraq had one of the densest air defenses in the world. And so we were really worried about that all the way, until 2003 when we went back into Iraq. And so then from 2004 to, I would say, 5 years ago, when Russia showed up on the scene in Syria, we were doing close air support, which is important, but it's not focused on high-end integrated air defense and how you defend that and how you beat that. And so the focus of the weapons school has to be relevant to what operators are going to do today. So when the folks graduated over the last 5 to 10 years, their focus was completely different than when I graduated. And so therefore the rides that they accomplished, the skill sets that they had, weren't the same. That being said, the problem solving, the solution sets, the integration, the networking, that was all the same, right? So while the tactical expertise may have been different, in truth, the most important parts, in my opinion, of the course were still there with all the graduates.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, would you agree? How have you seen the program evolve and where it might be going? Do you think it needs to evolve further in the next 10 years?
I think it certainly will. you know, like I said, the last 13 plus years of my career, that's where I was. And it's exactly where I wanted to be. It was a great place, great people, great mission. I found a little corner of the Air Force that I actually really, really liked, which, you know, there's an awful lot of other parts. Every now and then you get a glimpse of other parts of the military. And you're like, I don't think I would have done very well in that part of the military. I don't think I would have had very much fun there. I wouldn't have spent very much time there at all. But the Air Force Weapons School was like I said, it was a winning lottery ticket in life for me to get to be with that group of people and that mission and do that for as long as I did. All that being said, when it was time to walk away, when it was time to retire, I was totally comfortable doing that. Based on the quality of people that are there, knowing the way that the program runs. It is a self-sustaining, you know, force of good, not only for the Air Force, not only for the combat Air Force, but for DoD and for, for our nation's warfighting capability. I absolutely believe that the Air Force Weapons School is responsible for saving American lives in combat across the board. Sailors, Marines, soldiers, battlefield airmen, all of it. That program helps the Air Force set conditions in the battle space for follow-on combat success, and, you know, killing the hell out of the enemy and bringing a whole lot more of our people home than we would otherwise. So believe in the mission, but like I said, it was easier for me to walk away knowing that that program is in such good hands on a day-to-day basis.
They can survive without you.
They will thrive.
We don't know. We haven't had to do it ever. So
well, I'm pretty certain there was a syllabus rewrite in the Strike Eagle division like 5 minutes after I walked out of the building. They're like, finally, we got rid of that guy. Now we can actually start to rewrite some of these things. But no, those are basic tenets of the program, man. We got to hang on to that stuff. So as soon as I left, they're great dudes. They're taking care of the program. They're taking care of the community. They're doing the right things for the right people for the right reasons. So that mechanism exists as part of the culture. There is a forced syllabus rewrite every other year, but I will tell you that in practice, the syllabus and the design of the training missions are being rewritten on a class-by-class basis to be able to keep up with evolving tactics, an ever-evolving threat. And we have a lot of smart people that are very dedicated to the program, working to continue to update and keep the program as relevant as it can possibly be, and produce the best product for the Air Force. I think you asked about, hey, what did I see change during my career? Like I said, I was very fortunate. From almost day one, all of the weapons officers that I was exposed to were in that humble, approachable, credible. They were people that I wanted to work with. They were people that I wanted to be like. So I didn't really deal with the whole toxicity thing. You know, we used to try to describe kind of at the end of the program to folks that are getting ready to graduate. You know, you can go out there and you can kind of be one of three things as a graduate. You can either be effective, which is what we all strive for. You can be ineffective, or you can be toxic. And the toxic is the one that, you know, we were really trying to beat out of people, or trying to weed out of the program to never let those folks graduate. Never give them the credibility of being an instructor's instructor at a squadron level and having that toxic, those personality traits where, you know, they can never be wrong. They can never be told that they're wrong. They can't take criticism themselves. Openly hostile, in the debrief to like a personal level, or like, hey man, maybe you need to go see a psychiatrist or something. Those are the people that we definitely did not want associated with the program.
Yeah, that makes me think. I remember even in pilot training, my instructor is like, why are you out of position? And yelling at me. I'm like, I'm literally, all I want to do is be in position, man. That's my, every fiber of my being is wanting to be in position. Yeah. I'm just not proficient.
That's what I always used to say when, in my mind, when I'd be getting screamed at, man, why didn't you hit the target? I'm like, well, why aren't you 7 feet tall? I mean, like, there are things that I can't control. Today I did my best. Amen. Like, I missed. You can't be 7 feet tall. I don't know. If you could.
I am not as good at this as you are. You have 3,000 more hours in the airplane than I do. So the program strives for that. It's part of the culture. The culture keeps the program healthy. In the time that I was at the weapons school, I think one of the most, not just the growth in the number of squadrons, the number of weapon systems, but I think the most important piece of growth that went on was that we were able to eventually get first the JTAC, the Joint Terminal Area Control Advanced Instructor course. So JTAC AIC and JTAC AIC became the JTAC WIC. And we started putting patches on shoulders of battlefield airmen. There was so much resistance, inexplicable. But there were people at very senior levels of the Air Force for a long time that fought against that because they dug in and they could not wrap their brains around the fact that we were going to put an Air Force Weapons School patch on an enlisted guy. And it was just the most maddening, ridiculous argument. But we had, no kidding, like general officers that were pushing back on that stuff for a long time, were blocking this effort. And a very small cadre of very dedicated professionals that just would not let that thing die. And even though we were being told no by 2 stars, 3 stars, and 4 stars, we managed to be able to hide those guys in the A-10 WIC and the A-10 weapons school, the 66 weapons in the trough. They took care of those guys and did the right thing for the right people for the right reasons. And eventually we got over that hurdle. All those knuckleheads, the knuckleheads that were standing in the way, they timed out, they retired, they got out of the way. We got some adult decision makers in there that understood, warfare at the appropriate level, and the importance of having JTAC AIC become a JTAC WIC. Those guys are warriors. They are fighter pilots that don't fly fighters. But they are absolute warriors. They say hostile on the radio. They are responsible for raining hate on the enemy, like you read about, and saving lives on the battlefield. It was absolutely the right thing to do. And that opened up.
When did that happen?
I was told there'd be no math. You're gonna
pretty recently though, right?
Yes. So, oh man, let's try and put this in. They all start running together after 25 classes, right? 2012-ish.
Okay.
So Dave Bickle's going to kick my ass for not knowing that. But yeah, Pimp Freeman, Dave Bickle, Brian Patton, Peaches, those guys kept the pedal to the metal. Adam Veazey, they kept the pedal to the metal. The trough took care of them big time. Mike Drowley's he's the wing commander out at Nellis right now, the 57th wing commander, but he was the hog trough commander. Before that, he was an instructor in the trough, and those guys, they led the way, taking care of JTAC AIC and making sure that got rammed through. Eventually, when the time was right, that opened up. The clubhouse guys, Matt. Their program used to be AWIDS, right? The AWIDS Bubbas. So they've been around forever. Like they were part of the Barnyard and the 8th Weapons and the Command and Control WIC for the airborne control kind of career field. Those guys have been around forever, and we finally got over the hump with that one. And they are now part of the CRC WIC. They just started slapping patches on CRC WIC.
What's CRC?
Help me out here. Too many letters. It's the CRC, man. It's the
There's lots of acronyms.
CRC was a term that got coined after I retired, so I have plausible.
Okay, all right. Me too. That's what. Let's go with that one. Anyway, they're all our clubhouse controllers, which I don't know if you guys. I'm sure you guys were the same. You look up on the schedule and you see, all right, who is going to help control? It's basically out of your foreship. It's the ground control radar station that is providing you situational awareness on where the threats are and helps you with your targeting and all this other sort of stuff. And is really out of your foreship. If you're using them correctly and implementing them correctly, they're number 5 in your foreship. They're an integral part of your team, and situational awareness and comm is their weapon. Anyway, we'd look up on the scheduling board and be like, come on. There's a couple of different call signs from each agency has a different call sign. And without disparaging other agencies, when you'd look up on the board and you'd see the clubhouse, who are the enlisted AWIDS controllers, were going to be on mission with you, you knew you had a shot at actually passing the ride. So that was always a good thing. So I'm super proud. I'm super proud of the weapons school for fighting through that. And Perp, she was a big part of Chief Perp. She was a big part of getting that ran through. In fact, she delayed her retirement from the Air Force for about an extra 6 to 9 months in order to make sure that CRC WIC got through, and we started slapping patches on clubhouse controllers because it's the right thing to do. But that level of growth, where the Air Force finally got out of its own way and started welcoming our enlisted warrior instructor cadre into the weapons school culture, that's kind of the next level.
Right. Well, Matt, so I guess what you're kind of describing is that there's the whole evolution went from a program that was designed around fighter pilots,
Yes.
a very small cadre, and then expanded to other weapon systems. And eventually, it sounds like the Air Force wanted to take the culture and the values of the program and, bring that into also the enlisted corps, who in the Air Force, in the Joint Tactical Air Control community, they employ weapons and are just as important in, accomplishing the missions of our, national security priorities as the fighter pilots themselves. So I guess, Matt, would you say that the weapons school culture, like when you're at the squadron commander level or group commander level, it's different, right? You're leading not just warfighters, you're leading officers and enlisted. Some of them are combat operators and some of them are not. But seems like this is an initiative to try and spread those values to a larger base of our whole workforce. And is that happening effectively?
I agree with that. I would piggyback on one thing I said earlier, right? So it's, in my opinion, the process that you learn that the Air Force teaches at the weapons school is how to iterate and make your decision making better, make whatever you're trying to do, make it more effective, right? And so I learned as a squadron commander, and then at the group level, when you are interacting with people, even at the base where their job is to support the flying mission, let's say, they may have no idea what goes into that or what their background is, because they are a specialist at what they do, because that's how most organizations, but the Air Force, that's how they train, especially the young officers, but definitely young enlisted, right? They are specialists at the job right in front of them. And so you have to be careful about making assumptions over how we debrief, how we criticize, how we try to grow capability. And I can tell you factually, and I know people will laugh at this, I use the exact same, decision-making process, the OODA loop. You can look that up, but observe, orient, decide, and act, to be more able to communicate with folks that I just hadn't communicated with very often at that point in my career, right? So I would think about, hey, I tried to discuss this today. This young airman was having this problem. I tried to discuss and describe the problem and maybe give them awareness of how they were falling short, and I was unable to communicate that without having an emotional reaction on the other side. So then I would have to go find experts. I would go find my senior enlisted. I'd say, like, this is what I'm trying to do. This is my goal. How do I do it? And this problem-solving process was exactly the same, but instead of a Mark 82 hitting the ground and exploding, it was trying to develop a young airman and let them know that they were kind of missing the mark, but that's okay. And there's ways and people they could go talk to and learn from that would help them hit the mark the next time. And I was terrible at it the first few times I tried. And then over time, using that process and getting the experts to come help me, I had more success as time went on. So I would tell you that same exact problem-solving process.
So are you saying that, like, you changed your approach because of, like, okay, the airmen, like, I need to communicate with them in a different way in order for me to be effective? Or were you able to sort of train the people that you interacted with on the fact that, hey, when I provide feedback about how you failed, it's not because of a problem with you personally, it's because we're trying to improve your performance? Is it like, which one of those, or is it both?
It's both sides of the same problem. Initially, I needed to figure out a different way to more effectively communicate and more effectively provide growth opportunities to my young airmen, because I wasn't very good at it. It's that simple. And so that I knew, thanks to my weapons school days, who the experts were, how to communicate with them, how to communicate to the experts what my goals were so they then could give me feedback, constructive feedback, and sometimes not so constructive, on how to communicate more effectively. At the same time, during that process, you are engaging with the airmen enough times to, there's some trust that they have to build, right? And they have to believe that you are trying to help them, not that you're just there to vent some frustration, that you're there to talk about job performance, which is not the same to talk about quality of them as a human being, right? And separating those two things. And so it was kind of two ends of the same problem.
Right. I have a question here, I guess, for both of you. Like, I had like, what makes a good instructor? And then after a career teaching hundreds of instructors, would you say that it's something that what's the mix of natural talent and, you know, just your ability to develop someone into a good instructor? Is there?
So I'm going to go first because I think my answer will be shorter than Jeff's. I think what makes a good instructor, whether it's in the Air Force or not, whether it's coaching my son's soccer team or not, you have to be selfless. You have to approach things from what is it that the person I'm trying to instruct needs. And that is inherently difficult to do. It can be learned. It can be natural. It can be a talent that you brought. It can be a journey that you're on continually. But that to me was the epiphany of when I thought maybe I became a pretty good instructor, is when I would simply think, how did that person take what I said? What is it that they needed? What tool set are they missing, or what piece of information are they missing, and how will they receive that the best? Notice at no time did I say, well, I need to make sure that I'm looking good today. And it's a difficult thing. It's that human condition from which we all suffer.
Yeah, do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's some of those intangibles are the hardest things to learn, to put your finger on, to be able to say, okay, that exists. I can cultivate the other portions of this, but those are difficult. You know, there has to, in my mind, there has to be some kind of raw material. I don't know that it's something that everybody has.
Right.
I mean, I hate to be skeptical, you know, about humans in general, but it turns out I don't like most people. So there you go. I think there is some kind of raw material that needs to be there. You know, things that we used to try to focus on was baseline knowledge and capability, right? For our purposes in your specialty field or whatever it is that you're going to try to instruct to. I don't have the capability to instruct anyone on how to play the piano. I would like to learn how to play the piano someday, but I do not have that knowledge or capability, and I have no business trying to teach anybody. So at some level, you have to have the knowledge and the capability to do the job yourself.
Whatever that skill is.
Right. The next thing is the ability to, now that you have that knowledge and you have that capability, to sit down and organize a lesson that has timing control built in, that has a beginning, middle, and an end to the instruction, that teaches a skill set, and that you can break down maybe the entirety of what it is you're trying to teach into small digestible bites. Mm-hmm. In some cases, a syllabus is already built for you, and you just have to execute those pieces. But I would say the ability to take the knowledge and the capability that you have and break it down into digestible bites in some sort of organized manner, that you can present it to somebody that doesn't know anything about what you're talking about. I had an instructor one time, he says, I can't teach you everything I know about this airplane. I can teach you everything you know about this airplane. And that was a very important, like that's a very important concept, is to, as an instructor, to get over that in the beginning. Don't try to data dump your 6, 9, 12, 15, 25 years worth of knowledge in one lesson. That is an undigestible format. And that goes to the last thing, which is communication. The ability to effectively communicate, like Matt is talking about, and then to evaluate as this is going on, kind of that self-checking mechanism in your instruction. Is this registering? Is this providing, the ability for the student to move forward in whatever task it is that we're concentrating on? And if not, have more tools in the toolkit, another way to explain it, another way to go at the problem, another way to to try to teach it. Generally, for us, that happened in the debrief, where we would see instructors get off track in the beginning. Is they would present a problem. They would have too much knowledge and too much capability on their own. They would present 37 different methodologies for solving one little problem in the brief, and then leave it up to the student airborne when things are happening at 500 knots and 9 Gs. Present them the opportunity to choose your own adventure between those 37 options. No, that is not correct. Provide them the way to do it on that particular day, the one that you believe in, that you think is best suited to their capabilities. And when that doesn't work, take a break, provide some in-flight instruction and try something else, or wait until you get back to the debrief, and now you can present your other 36 options for the choose your own adventure. But I think those are some of the things. There is raw material. There has to be some inherent capability and knowledge in the instructor themselves, and then they have to have the ability to organize that into a digestible lesson and communicate it effectively, and then reevaluate whether or not it's working.
Yeah. Cool. So after your storied careers going all over the world, another question that came in that I kind of just want to close on is just a question about like war stories. So some lesson that you may have learned from your experience as an officer in the Air Force, or just something fun that happened. And I thought, since our friend Nate asked this question, I'd give one of my own, which is that Matt, when we were stationed at PSAP, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia.
It's open again.
It is?
Yeah.
You're jazzed about that?
Way to go.
Woo, let's go back to PSAP. Dude.
All right. Well, it was, so this was, it was 20 years ago this summer, because it was just before 9/11. And I remember you were there. I feel like Jesse Smith may have even been over there. But we had, we were doing the Southern Watch, enforcing a no-fly zone over Iraq, and the chow hall had really good cookies. Like, they were good.
Where you're going with it.
And we were the Lieutenants Protection Association, which the lieutenants in our squadron, we got some idea about putting up a sign, and we put up a sign that said, there's only one cookie per person, right? Due to like shortages or something. No, this was not true. It was a completely fake sign. And I'm telling you, within 5 minutes, the NCOs were enforcing that rule and yelling at people for taking cookies. And it just brought us a lot of joy. Because there's so much in the Air Force, and I think in the military, where you don't have to know the reasons. You can't know all of the reasons behind the rules. You have to shut up and color, because there are the rules. And man, if you put a policy out, people will start enforcing it. And so I just thought it's a fun moment. It also reminded me of how much fun we could have together in times that were, nobody really wanted to be over there, but we definitely made the most of it.
I agree with that.
That is a hilarious story, Justin. And soldiers and Marines all across the world, if any of them are watching this podcast, are like, freaking Air Force telling war stories about goddamn cookies. And they're right.
They were good cookies. What do you want?
They were really good.
What are you going to say?
So anyway, Matt,
funny.
any good memories from
so
your
I'll
time?
continue on that theme. I'll keep this short. So I already told you when we showed up to Jordan, we didn't have enough area to store all our weapons. And the powers that be, the operations center, had not figured that logistics train out. And so we kept running out of weapons. I mean, it sounds like something out of Catch-22. Like, what is this, 1944? Like, we just kept running out of weapons. And they're like, well, why do you keep running out of weapons? I'm like, I don't know. You're the ones that keep telling us to drop them. Like, what do you want me to do? But so literally the answer was, well, you got to solve it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about this. I don't know how to get weapons from place to place. It's not my expertise. So I start calling around to the experts. And I got this crusty old master sergeant at the operations center. He's like, I think you should just go for a run around your airfield. I'm like, what? Are you telling me I need to calm down? He's like, no, I just think you should go for a run around the airfield. And like an idiot, I go put on my shoes and I go for a run around the airfield, and I see all these little bunkers. I'm like, what in the world? So the Jordanians, as it turns out, were not worried about weapon security or safety, and they had 500 weapons that we had sold to them in 2000. So, you're talking 12 years before, just piled up in these quasi-underground bunkers all around the airfield. I'm like, so you're telling me that the Operations Center has known we've had all these hundreds of weapons at our airfield for months, and I've been complaining about it for months, and I get some sergeants like, oh, you should take a run around the airfield. That's how we're going to solve this problem? But sure enough, even though it was the craziest advice I'd ever got, we found some weapons and we were able to keep going until we got the logistics train solved. So that's probably the craziest solution. That's the craziest problem solution that I've ever been part of.
And you just went over and were like, we're taking these.
No, I just went over. So the problem was you have to get permission from the Jordanian government, and they have to call people. So I went over to the Jordanian squadron commander. I said, here's the situation. You have all these weapons. You're not dropping them. He's like, I didn't even know we had them. Sure, you can have them. I'm like, do you have to ask anybody? He's like, no.
He doesn't like to run.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to run. I don't want to go look. Are you kidding me? It's like 100 degrees.
Jordanian squadron commander. Why would I run? I don't run from anything.
It's like a Band of Brothers episode.
Sure. Yeah, so that was, talk about choose your own adventure. That was the craziest thing. I'm moving all these changes. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a 2,000-pound bomb ready to go right here. Okay.
All right. Well, it's a non-standard procurement story.
That's how it happens.
That's rapid procurement, DoD, right there.
That's operational planning working for you. So,
yeah. Jeff, how about you?
Well, I certainly don't have the depth and breadth of war stories that legitimate war hero Blitz Ayres does. Like no kidding, Matt deployed a ton. I was stamped for training use only on the Nellis Range for a long time. So I am proficient as hell.
You can still see it.
I am proficient as hell at winning the Nellis War on the NTTR. But no, I'd say it kind of goes back to where we were talking about, hey, the strength of. I can't speak for other training programs in the Air Force, but I can say that the Air Force never asked me to do anything in an airplane that I was not at some level overqualified to do, or certainly that I wasn't prepared to do. Does a really good job of getting you ready to, and they should, right? They're going to hand you a 50, or in some cases these days, $150 million airplane as a young 20-something-year-old kid. They want you to be able to take care of that national asset that the taxpayers paid for, and they want you to not hurt yourself in the process. So that training program is really, really squared away. And I would say my worst story that went with that was actually first combat sortie that I ever flew as a lieutenant, a lieutenant wingman. I'm flying with Lieutenant Dan Markham in the back seat, which he's a buddy of mine from the F-15E training unit. We were brand new in the airplane. Had just gotten to the Chiefs, go to Northern Watch to go do some no-fly zone enforcement, and they assign us. Our flight lead is a guy named Dipper Stevens, who was a Gulf War I guy. So he's an old head in the squadron at the time, crusty lieutenant colonel, always had a big chaw in, hence the name Dipper. And at home, the funny thing about Dipper was a real twitchy guy. He was our ADO in charge of scheduling when we were all schedulers, and he could ping and sweat the small stuff. And man, we were trying to get him to switch to decaf for years, just to calm down and just get out of everybody's chili. So he's a big pinger at home around the administrative stuff. And then we're operating out of Incirlik, Turkey. And we're getting ready to start flying combat missions, and all of a sudden this air just falls over Dipper. Dipper is the coolest cat in the squadron, man. He was back in his element. He's back in Iraq, dropping bombs, killing folks on the ground. I mean, he was just smooth. He was the calmest guy in the squadron, easiest bro to be around. It was an amazing transformation. So anyway, he's flying with Shane Steinke, who's another lieutenant, bud of ours from the FTU. So Dipper gets assigned these 3 snot-nosed lieutenants to take them on their first combat sortie. And I'm not kidding you, the entire flight brief, he had enough respect for us and respect for the training that we went through at home in the program. The combat brief was, he throws a chart down and he says, all right, boys, here's what's going to happen. We're going to come off the tanker. We're going to flow south. We're going to do a pylon turn down here around the end of Mosul. We're going to drive down this road. This is where they normally station the tactical SAMs. We'll see if they're down there and if they're operating. We'll try to see if they're going to shoot at us. If they shoot at us, then we can start dropping some bombs. Sound good? We kind of look at each other like, this guy's got to be full of shit, right? Like this is. He's like, yeah, when we were here a few years ago, this is the road. This is kind of where they hide stuff in this orchard and stuff down there. So we'll take a drive down there. We'll hang a left. Keep your speed up. Stay above 0.9 Mach. Spread out. Check each other's six. Make sure you got your chaff and flare and stuff armed up. And we're just going to drive down the lane. We'll see if we can get them to shoot at us. And then that's at the time the rules of engagement were if they shot at you, then you can shoot back. You couldn't do anything until they did that, but if they shot at
trolling.
We're going trolling. We're going trolling. First one. So sure enough, hit the tanker, come off as soon as we cross the line into northern Iraq. Okay, arm hot, and no kidding. Within 5 minutes of arm and hot, we just as Dipper called it, we do a tack turn, tack 90 left. Around the south end, kind of driving along the northern edge of the no-fly zone boundary, and sure enough, RWR. A couple of missiles come up, an SA-6 that launches 3 missiles, turns the illuminator on. One of the missiles starts to bend, and then those guys got scared. They turned their illuminator off. We got scared. We checked away, kick out a bunch of flares. There's F-16s with harms inbound over the shoulder, are raining down, coming back in. We check off of that. They start giving us a vector toward the target. We actually rolled back in order to bomb the guy that was shooting at us. But he was parked next to this, like, no kidding. I'll never forget it. Dan cues the targeting pod, and there's a track right there. There's a multi-story building, apartment complex, or I don't know, school or bus full of nuns or whatever the hell it was. And we had just a real quick conversation where he's like, dude, he's like, civilian area, withhold. We come off target, kind of flow back. They start giving us vectors to an alternate target area. But I remember that, like, Dipper called it, super cool, keep the speed up, exactly as the training had said. The RWR goes off, first move is to check away, kick out some chaff and flare, harms are inbound over the shoulder. And I thought, man, this is the effing Air Force I signed up for. This is cool.
You got shot at your first combat mission ever.
Within the first 5 minutes. And Dipper set it up that way. Like, he set it up. He's like, hey man, we're not, we're not here for a tickling contest. Like, let's go get this thing started. Let's go drop some bombs. So yeah, we did, like, first combat mission, and there was this like ammo storage facility or whatever that was up by the dam out in the mountains and stuff like that. So they were pre-planned targets. And when we couldn't retaliate right against that guy, because of course he's parked next to the bus full of nuns, we drive around, and everybody in theater now is just raining hate down on this storage facility and clean the airplanes off, right? So, whatever it was like 4 GB-12s and a GB-10 or something like that. Clean the airplane off on the first combat sergeant. So, but the point of all that was all of the training that had gone on up to that point, you just had to trust it. You just had to shut up and color, do what you're told. You're too young to actually know what's going on. So my message to the young guys would be, trust your training. The program that is there, that is in place, and the levels of supervision, you're going to have a Dipper Stevens leading you around that is going to know what's up. Trust it. It works.
Yeah, and that experience was well before you went to weapons school.
Yeah,
and so everybody else on your flight was also young in the airplane.
Yeah, all this. So Stinky went to weapons school. Shane Stinky went to weapons school the class before I did. He retired as an 06 out of the deputy command job. I think from your Jordanian base there, Matt. When he came home from that, he retired out of that one. Super successful career. Bigglesworth, Markham, great friend, great dude. I think he actually got out of the strike eagle community because of me. So I did something to him on a flight one time. He was my Wizzo and kind of my assigned Wizzo for the longest time. He's told me years later, he's like, yeah, you're actually part of the reason that I moved over to the RPA community. So I didn't have to fly with you guys like you anymore. I think he's mostly kidding, but something actually happened. It was a fairly, I think, visceral situation. But he had a super successful career. Did great things for the RPA community and stood up some platforms and stuff while he was over there. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, great people, but yeah, super young guys that don't know anything about anything, but your training will take care of you. That's a whole nother story, but that goes back to, I hurt myself at the zoo on my first parachute jump, not doing what I was told. We did the free fall parachuting course there as dinks at the zoo. And first time out the door, I didn't do what I was told. I tried to Vegas freestyle it a little bit, wind up going out of control, flipping over on my back, go to your emergency body position or whatever it was, because we were jumping rounds at the time, and pull the ripcord. And I can remember watching the drogue chute like go and just thinking, you know, temporal distortion or whatever, thinking, man, that is really fast. That is going fast. And then took a riser hickey with the metal buckle right across the jaw and wound up with a compound fracture of my jaw. And that was because I didn't do what I was told. So that had happened years prior. So I'll be damned by the time that we get to northern Iraq and Dipper Stevens says, keep your speed up and make sure your CMD is armed and spread out and watch my six. I'm going to listen. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to do what I'm told and follow my training.
And I remember when your jaw was wired shut for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And you had told us that you were already a parachute guy from before.
Well, yeah, apparently not correctly. So,
you and Johnny had gone parachuting, but that's it's pretty awesome to see everything full circle in that. Like, man, we walked up the Bring Me Men ramp 25, 30 years ago. Yeah. And then I went to your retirement, Matt, and hearing your colleagues talk about your dedication and your leadership and what an honor it was to serve with you. And I feel the same way. As an honor to know you 30 years ago and to go through this journey on different paths and end up where we are today. And it's also cool that, like, I was thinking of the 80s. In the 80s on Saturday Night Live, there was that sketch with middle-aged man. And damn it, if here we are, middle-aged men, but you're retired, but yet this is our whole lives in front of us. So another career, another life, and then you get the chance to raise your kids and see how they turn out as well. It's pretty neat. So
not the same. I look back on May 29th, 1992, and just think about how I knew absolutely nothing about anything. I mean, I 18 years old from a small town in Kansas. I just look at what I'm doing now, and like I would be shocked. My 18-year-old self wouldn't believe it if I would say, you know, I still have these amazing friends that you're going to meet in the next week of your life, and 30 years later, you're still going to talk to them, and you're going to have these amazing stories to share. It's incredible. I'd do it again.
I think about May 29th, 1996, when we drove out of there and put it in the rearview mirror and thought, oh my God, can you believe we got out of here?
Yeah.
Graduated.
Yeah, I didn't think it was ever going to not be a cadet. And then the idea that you would have a 20-year career already behind you is hard to take in.
Yeah. I thought I was going to get kicked out on a weekly basis. So
did I.
The fact that we actually all made it
kicked out.
We all were pretty sure.
Yeah, pretty sure.
Make it.
Like I said, over under on that one. I feel like we beat that. Did you guys go? I think before that 20-year reunion thing, I had only been back twice. We went back for Nate's wedding, and I went back when Das Boot was killed to visit his gravesite there at the end. Those are the two times that I went back before the 20th.
I had gone back for a couple football games. Just my travel had aligned, but no, I hadn't gone back for any official functions.
Yeah, that was my only time, and it's a cool place.
I think it's like some level of like scar tissue PTSD thing. They're like, I never wanted to give them another shot at the title. I was so lucky to get out of there the first time, right? They're like,
they might find out what I did.
Yeah, they might. Yeah.
Paper that says, sorry, you didn't actually graduate. All your careers.
That's the recurring. Well, I mean, I've got a couple of buddies that have gone back to be like AOCs and stuff like that. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, we were lucky to get out of there the first time. Now you're going to be in charge of like 100 of those.
Right, and their actions could affect your career.
Yeah, dude, they're 18 to 22 years old doing what 18 to 22-year-old people do, and it's all against the rules, man. Get out of there. So
yeah, good luck, Linnell.
Curtis L. Perry.
Curtis A, dude, get it right.
I'm sorry.
And it's crazy. Our classmate is the commandant.
Yeah. She's doing great.
She's doing
good honor.
Good. Yeah, I know. It's amazing.
Or the dean. She's not the dean. She's the commandant.
No, she is the dean, right?
She's the dean. She's the dean.
Dean.
Yeah.
One of the.
We love you, Linnell.
One of those general things.
We're paying attention.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's great to see you guys. Thanks for joining me for this week. And next week I'll be in San Diego. Have another episode, hopefully, about my friend Mike, who started a nonprofit that has 150 beds for homeless youth in San Diego. And so we're going to find out what happened and how that all came about, similar to finding out about the careers of people I met 30 years ago. It's pretty cool.
Excellent.
All right. See you guys then.
Justin.
All right. Bye.
See you, Blitz.
See you later.